good afternoon to those who are from Europe and Eurasia region, and good morning or good evening to everyone else from different parts of the world, because today we are a really international group, a global group of people, and it's so nice to see all of you. And I really welcome you and thank you for joining today. This webinar is part of the European Phenology campaign that is organized by our team at the GLOBE Europe and Eurasia Regional Office. So my name is Lenka Kleger, and I'm here with my colleague Bára Semeráková. Bára will give us support. So if you need anything during the webinar, please write in chat to her, or you can also write to me, of course. And also write to chat during the whole webinar. Anytime you need to ask something or anytime you need to comment, we will have time to discuss at the end, but we will, of course, get to any questions or comments that you will send us during the initial presentation. We will spend together about 1 hour, and we will be talking about the importance of phenology and about the unique connection of people and nature in Alaska. And yeah, with this short introduction, I would like to introduce our precious guest, Dr. Elena Bautista Sparrow. I'm really, really happy that she had time to come to our webinar and to talk to us. Elena is a scientist at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And I have to say that thanks to her, we are doing phenology in GLOBE, because she's one of the founders of Greening's protocols and of phenology in the GLOBE program. And she's also working with native communities in Alaska. And so she will share today her experience with phenology and with the wisdom of the communities in Alaska about nature, and she will talk about this all with us now. So this was enough talking from me, and Elena, please, floor is yours, and thanks for coming.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you all. And I'm originally from the Philippines, from the tropics, and now have been in Alaska for quite a while, more than 30 years. And so before we start, I would like to, if you would go to the next slide, please, Lenka. I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. Let's see. One slide back.
Yes. Please wait a second for the Zoom to be able to communicate with our presentation. Should hopefully not take long. Okay. So that was the first one. This one is okay.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So we have started doing this as part of, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, being acknowledging the land that we are on. So I'm in Fairbanks, Alaska, on the traditional and unceded homelands of the Lower Tanana Dene people. I gratefully acknowledge and honor them, their past and current relationship with and care of the land. And I'm committed to building long-term reciprocal partnerships with indigenous individuals and organizations in my work in support of their sovereignty and self-determination. So here where we are, where University of Alaska Fairbanks sits on what is called the Troth Yera, which means potato field. That's where the indigenous people used to gather their, the indigenous potatoes, not exactly like the potatoes that we're eating, but, a source of sustenance. and they live off of the land for their subsistence. And so they take very good care of the land. Next slide, please. So on the next slide, I will be acknowledging colleagues, collaborators on the research and education part of the phenology, and also on the current work that I'm doing with indigenous communities. We started here in Alaska, but we're also been inviting teams from outside of Alaska to come, and we work not only with educators, but also community members. So Dr. Dave Verbila, Mike White, Dr. Leslie Gordon, Rico Gazal, Ms. Melinda Chase, who is an indigenous person, and she's the director of the Association of Interior Native Educators. Dr. Katie Spellman, who I knew from when she was in kindergarten, and I gave her an award when she was a little girl, and she took it to heart and got her PhD. And after she got her PhD, I said, you know, we need to write a proposal together, and we got this NASA grant that's ongoing now. And then my some education specialists, Martha Coplin and Christine Butcher, and now the current one is Christina Buffington, and some teachers, you know, really long-time teachers, and many others with their students who have been with our Alaska Globe program since 1996. Next slide, please. So on the next slide, I will be showing the outline of, you know, what my presentation is about, the importance of phenology, to whom and why, and then the use of globe and indigenous science in environmental studies in rural Alaska. Next slide, please. So who cares about phenology? You know, naturalists in Britain, Scandinavia, Japan, more than those countries, for hundreds of years have been appreciating the changes in the season, whether it's the blooming or the start of the plant growing season. And educators and climate scientists, geoscientists, ecologists, farmers. This is not an all-encompassing list, but farmers and foresters and fire scientists. Then now general public, because we have citizen or community scientists observing what's happening around the world. And then of course the indigenous peoples, who are very much connected to their to the land and to their environment, where they view them, whether they're living or non-living, as relatives. And so of course you take care of your relatives. You don't abuse or discard. And so, you know, they feel like they're related to plants and animals, as well as the non-living water and rocks and soil. Next slide, please. So in Europe, they have developed a 250-year index. Now it's even older than that, where scientists have combined since 1753 to create a 250-year index of first flowering. So in Great Britain, they are flowering 5 days earlier for every 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature. And so it's now, you know, 2 to 12 days earlier for an average plant's flowering. And so that is one reason why phenology is important. It is a good indicator of the changes in our climate and in our environment. Next slide, please. So why do I care about phenology personally? So besides appreciating, what happens, in our world, when the first bud opens or the first flower comes, it's really, to me, I feel like it's like a miracle every spring when everything kind of comes out and comes alive again and awakens to this new beginning. And it's encouraging because then for us, ourselves as humans, we can do the same thing. We can always renew ourselves. And so it's a good reminder. And so it affects my health also. I saw in the chat that Brian Campbell had mentioned about there's pollen all over his car, and that affects me because I have allergies, and so of course it signals a time of for allergies, but also for my mental health. It's very good because there is evidence for uh, everyone who's able to go out and enjoy the environment where there are trees and plants, that it is good for not only physical health but also mental health. And for me, it was also a means of funding, be able to get funding for research and education. And that's when this remote sensing scientist, Dave Verbilla, came to me and said, "Do you have any GLOBE students observing the plant, the beginning of the plant growing season and the end?" And I said, "No, but then we can propose." And we got funded. And so that was the beginning of this GLOBE Phenology, green up and green down. So next slide, please. And so so the GLOBE Phenology, what we had started, the green up and green down, investigates the timing and length of the plant growing season and in the leaf emergence. So starting from when the buds are very tight and start opening up, swelling, when and all this is being prepared by nature, where there's warmer temperatures, longer days, longer sunlight, and then the water starts and the sap starts running in the trees and in the plants. And so then there's leaf expansion, and then they grow, and then at the end there's the what is called senescence, when then they start becoming dormant again because of the winter in countries where there is winter. And in countries that don't, then their cycles run between the wet and dry seasons. So next slide, please. So for why should anyone care, there's at least 4 reasons besides the ones that I've given: for education, for climatology, for ecology, that and earth system science, for carbon and water cycle, and as a earth system science measurement. Phenology is a good one because it integrates, it's affected and influences different parts of the earth system. Next slide, please. On education, it's easy because phenology happens everywhere. It's low cost and easy to observe. For us, for the green up, green down, all you need is your sensor, your eyes, and millimeter ruler, and it's simple and easy to observe, closely connected with the earth system, and it's to make people more aware of what's happening in their environment. And for indigenous people, the elders have been telling me that they really want their the younger generation to be connected with the environment, because nowadays we also have lots of students, plugged in for, listening to music, which is good too, but sometimes completely unaware of what's going on in their environment. Next slide, please. For students, it's simple to set up inquiries based on phenological observations. And we've had in the GLOBE Learning Expedition, where the students come and share their GLOBE projects, where I remember one where two students from two deaf schools collaborated together on phenology. So they're comparing, what's happening with same species, but from different places in the United States. And in Thailand, they've also had many phenology projects on using plants. And then, of course, now there's other, you think of phenology, the biological recurrence that happens as affected by climate. There's now different organisms, not only plants, that are affected by climate. So it's an excellent example of how variation in climate can influence the development of plants. Next, please. So in climate, maybe you could click one more and see if that, yeah. Climate affects phenology, and click another. But phenology also affects climate, because if you, once that the plants get active, photosynthesis happens, and also transpiration, where water vapor now, the plant is not only absorbing the carbon dioxide, but also releasing water vapor. And so it's cooler where there are plants, especially when they're actively, when they're active. Next, yeah, the partitioning of net radiation into latent and sensible heat. And so the next click, please. When we have plants, more energy is used in latent heat, reducing the sensitive heat. So besides the cooling effect of the water vapor being released, there's also the energy from the sun is being taken because, for its activities in photosynthesis. And so it reduces the heat that we feel. And so, and the last clicks, if you would, the albedo. Plants are usually darker than soils, and so they absorb more radiation and makes it cooler. Next slide, please. And on ecology, the carbon cycle research has suggested that the length of the active plant growth has been extended. And it could mean, and it does mean, increased carbon storage. And so the activities of the plants in the greening up is responsible for the up and down appearance of the global carbon curve. And if you click on the next slide, please. So there increase in plant growing season length, and another, keep on clicking, yes. That remotely sensed data shows that the growing season, 6 days advance in the spring, and then 4 days delay in the fall. And so, and if you click one more time, so there's, this is the reference for this, and then there's been many other more studies showing this increase in plant growing season. And so there's more time for carbon dioxide to be absorbed from the air by plants. And but because there are sensors, satellite sensors are not always perfect, depending on the position that they have, the age of the sensor, and also the atmospheric conditions that could interfere with how the sensors are operating. And so ground observations from students and general public are still much needed to ground truth what's happening from the air and on the ground. Next slide, please. And so there's that need for ground observations. And if we can go to the next slide. So this shows the concentration of carbon dioxide at Mauna Loa, Hawaii, where they continue to observe the concentrations of carbon dioxide. And of course, now we're more than 380 parts per million carbon dioxide. But you see the up and down, and that is signified by what's happening in the trees. So where it's the height of the up and down, that's when the start of the green up happens, and so this shows the as it pulses through the earth, these different ones. You know what? We forgot to. Maybe now is a good time to show a video. I totally forgot.
So I will play it now, okay?
Yes, please.
Right?
Yeah. And some of you may have seen this. Because I was going to ask you what you think is happening. So you can either put it in the chat, or if you want to say aloud, you know, what do you think is happening? Okay, would anybody want to share? There's Alaska. So somebody put there. Somebody said seasonal changes. Yes. Yeah, so that those are the what we call the plant waves. You know, they're occurring. So in some places you see it greening up, in other places, you know, especially the opposite end of the world, you know, it's greening down. And so that's what is happening in the world. Okay, next slide, please. So in ecology, you know, why phenology is important. So we saw that the length of the active plant growth has been extended. And here in Fairbanks, you know, 10 days extension of the plant growth is significant, especially since our plant growing season is short here up north. And so it would also mean, you know, more carbon dioxide being taken in, and may increase transpiration and humidity. And in boreal forest, where we have a lot of here, the green up may result in afternoon showers because of the increased humidity, and that, you know, that happens. So it affects the water cycle, and as well as it being affected by the amount of precipitation in the earth system. Next slide, please. So the critical feature is that processes occurring at the leaf level strongly influence global processes. And so the observations by students, you know, on the leaf and on the twig level is very important, because of the movement of water vapor out of the leaves and carbon dioxide into the leaves, a function of phenology, very important for our Earth system science. Next slide, please. And then, of course, in Earth as a system, the phenological variation is influenced by areas of the Earth system and vice versa, climate, soils, biology, and human activity. Next slide, please. So in summary, phenology, is easy to observe, why it's important, and why we should care about it. It influences many Earth processes. It's an excellent biospheric measurement of the response to climate variability. It's an indicator of climate change impacts on plants and animals, and of course, which we want to know too, because we're affected by that. And phenology reflects connectivity and synchrony in, or lack of it. I think there's been observations that what they call the phenological mismatch, where sometimes the plants bloom and produce much earlier, and so the insects come too sooner, and then the migration of birds and migration of animals happens at the same time, and so sometimes they have those mismatches, and they don't, the food chain is interrupted, and so phenology is a good integrator of what's happening in the ecosystem and the environment. Next slide, please. So now we go to the part of the use of GLOBE and indigenous science in environmental studies in rural Alaska. And so we would like to introduce our NASA project, Arctic and Earth Science, STEM, integrating GLOBE and NASA. So we have a short video to share with you.
Arctic and Earth Science aims to create climate change learning experiences for people of all ages that braids indigenous and Western science. Climate change in the Arctic and beyond is rapidly altering how we live. Arctic and Earth Science trains community teams of youth, educators, and community members to learn about these changes and take action. We use curricula centered on indigenous values and ways of living, global learning and observations to benefit the environment, or GLOBE, and NASA assets. Teams return home to learn from elders and community members and design their own GLOBE investigations to actively make a difference on climate change issues that matter to them. Subject matter experts who are working on similar topic areas connect in person or virtually with community teams and youth groups to share ideas and discuss their personal journey to STEM careers. We're looking for NASA-funded or employed subject matter experts doing work related to climate change who are willing to share their passion, time, and stories. Join us.
Today is Science Day.
So if we could go back to the slides, please.
Sure.
So what we're doing is braiding multiple knowledge systems, both indigenous and Western science. And we also are focusing on the needs of the communities that we are serving. Here in Alaska and in the Arctic, we are experiencing climate change twice the rate of what's happening in other places. And what happens in other places affects us, and what happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. It also affects the rest of the world. And so it's important for us to be thinking about how we are all connected and how we can help communities that are facing climate change more drastically than in other places to adapt to it So one thing that we always emphasize is we don't go to communities and say, here's what we're going to do for you, but what can we do to help you? And so, like I said, we invite not only educators, but also community members to our professional development workshops. Next slide, please. And elders and scientists are key influentials. And storytelling makes climate science relevant, meaningful, and actionable. Because the indigenous people have successfully adapted and continue to adapt to their environment from millennia, they give hope. The youth tell us that what the elders say, they are hopeful because they are witnesses of successful adaptation. And so next slide, please. We have developed a learning model in our Arctic and Earth Science. It kind of follows the scientific model too, but it starts with interviewing local people, grounding it in the knowledge of what is known in the community, interviewing local people about the science and impacts of climate change, and then discovering what youth and adults know and identify key climate change issue and brainstorm investigation. And so what we want to do is not only for the STEM learning to happen, but also for the students to be empowered to do action, to do something and help their community. And so then they have the cultural activities and then talking with scientists and collaborating with the scientist or community member and making sense, after they do a GLOBE investigation and making sense of their research, and then designing and implementing a stewardship project. So as we braid this knowledge system, then and build on what the students started to know from when they are working within their families. It seems to, and we have had evaluation to show that there is effectiveness in doing this process. Next slide, please. So we have examples of what students have done. These are students from Quitlook. They're Alaska Native students, and they found, as from their own observations and listening to elders, that the erosion is an important problem in their community because of the thawing and the degradation of the permafrost. Permafrost is permanently frozen ground, or ground that has been frozen continuously for at least 2 years. And so because of the increase in temperatures, that permafrost has been degrading, and so it is contributing to the erosion of the banks. And I don't know, maybe I cropped it too much, the picture, but this is the start of the erosion. There's a big hole right here, and I don't know if you can see the arrow on my, yeah. And so that's what they decided to determine the rate of erosion. And after they finished their investigation, granted that it was only within the span of 1 year, they already found out some things from their GLOBE study, that where there's more vegetation along the shore, it seems like there's less erosion happening. And then they also observed that because the boats were being anchored anywhere and everywhere, and that was contributing to the erosion as well, besides the permafrost degradation. And also the amount of swell when boats go fast on the river. And so they went to the tribal council and recommended, so they had recommendations of what to do. And so that's their contribution to their community. And then when they went to Ireland, and I don't know how many of you were there for the Globe Learning Expedition, they were able to share their project in the science session and also in the cultural session, where, because storytelling is very much a part of the indigenous ways of knowing and doing, that they wrote a story about their project, but in song, and they danced to it. And so the part of the dancing, I think you saw in that short video about the Arctic and Earth Science Project. And this shows the four students, two female and two male, and then their elder who went there, and their teacher who went to Ireland. And next slide, please. So we try and supplement it with a culturally responsive curriculum. And the way we've done it is because the different seasons, coincide with different subsistence activities. That's how we intertwined the indigenous and Western science. And so on the right-hand side, you see this is Maxine Dibert showing how this curriculum that we have developed, learning from Koyish, or which means birch, and the relationship with birds and the changing land, is arranged according to the different seasons. And then, where green up happens, there's also, it's a time to be thinking about birch bark harvesting. And the curriculum is based and founded on indigenous knowledge. And this indigenous knowledge came from camps. They call them academies camps, where elders were sharing their knowledge and educators attended those camps. And after the camps, the educators wrote curricula. And so what we're doing in this is now expanding that curricula with GLOBE and NASA. And so in the fall, there's the green down, and there's berry picking and forest place names, and so that's how we're doing this. Okay, next slide, please. And so another example of in this project is from Kongiganak, and we had a team come with an elder. This is Elder Edward David, and then Cassius Brown, he is the assistant principal and also a teacher, and Joseph Mute, who is a tribal administrator. And so they have been observing how permafrost they've been having problems with permafrost degrading and thawing in their village. And so, which is producing a lot of flooding in areas. And so they have been wanting to apply, and actually they have applied to this federal agency in the United States called FEMA, who usually help with disasters. And they were not successful until they submitted with their application not only their observations, but also NASA satellite data. So we had, we connected them with a GLOBE NASA scientist who has been doing remote sensing in Alaska, besides the other places that he has. And he had satellite data showing the start of this degradation for several years. And so that helped them. And so, I think that is, next slide, please. And so I thank you all for your attention, and I appreciate your attending from wherever you are at the end of your day and sharing this time with me. Thank you. And if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Elena. I'm really losing words. It was so interesting. I find very inspiring the connection of science and the wisdom of elders, and just to go and ask the people in the tribes. I find it very, very inspiring also for us here in Europe and in the campaign. So thanks a lot for sharing these beautiful examples of cooperation, and also for sharing the whole experience with the phenology and the importance of phenology for different or in different disciplines. And yes, please, now it's time for everyone. If you have any questions, you can just unmute yourself and talk, or raise your virtual hand, or you can also write in a chat.
So Bara, you wrote something. Maybe you want to go ahead and speak it out. Yeah.
Yes. So Elena, thank you for the presentation. It's really inspiring. And my question was about languages, right? Because I think it's quite essential, like how we relate to the world around us. We use some language to describe it. And in many languages, you have like different, expressions and different notions that you cannot really, you can feel it, but you cannot really translate everything. So I don't know if actually they, the kids from the communities or the elders, if they use their own language, when they talk about what is surrounding them. Do you have any example, for example?
Yes, so we do. So in this curriculum, so in the first or second slide that I had showed, where the map of the Alaska, where it shows the different languages and where there are different people, and so it is important. And so we're in our curriculum, we have not only some words like on birch, koyish, and then we have a branch game that they play, and so ketlukana, and when we have summer camps where the students learn, both, not only the native students, but also students who are not native learn some words. And what we're hoping is for people who share this or use the curriculum, that they are able to apply what's the indigenous language being used in their own community. So we're not prescriptive. We're not saying that this is the only language that they could use, but then they could, probably fill in. And in some, yeah. So that is very important. You are right. And because there's so many languages in Alaska alone, there are 229 tribes, and so there are major languages, but then for 229 tribes, and so yeah, that's being encouraged, because language is very important in maintaining culture.
Thank you for this. And I have one more very naive question, because you were showing the seasons, right? How you work with that in the curricula.
Yes.
And I just would like to know if you can describe, like, if you say winter, when it starts, when it ends, because it will be different to our winter, I'm sure. So
right. And
can you just tell us how it works in Alaska?
So here we have our spring and our summer, is much shorter. So winter it used to be by August, it's starting the fall. Sometimes we joke about spring being one day and fall being one day. But now, the seasons are actually longer, because the start of the growing season is earlier, and then the end of the growing season, the fall, now is coming later, and that affects the subsistence. If there are lots of leaves on the trees, that affects how they can see the moose that they are trying to harvest for their own food. And so usually, and also how they treat the animal. After they harvest the animal, then they have to hang it up and what they call treat it, so that it will be and during that time it has to be cool. But sometimes it's warm, and that is not good for the meat, for it to be hanging up and it's too warm. And so that is one of the things that they have to be adjusting. And so right, we don't have like green up and green down happens. Green up happens quickly, like sometimes in a matter of a week it's done. The bud bursts, and then there's the leaves are all out of the buds, whereas in some places it's it's a longer process. Yeah.
Thank you. I would be having many more questions, but I want to encourage the others to ask, so that it's not only me who is asking.
In the chat, there are no questions. There are just so many nice comments about the presentation. So yeah, you can read them, but I don't see any questions. So perhaps Bara, you can keep asking if you like. Or maybe Larissa is going to ask. I can see her.
Larissa, you usually have questions.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes I have too many of them. For those of you who know me, I'm always very active. I'm speechless, honestly, Elena. It's just it's really touching a very core of what we're doing. It's just the wisdom of our planet, basically, right? So it's really the essence of what we do and how we do and why we do it. So and it's not the question, should we do it? It's just something that should be just a part of our daily thoughts and daily activities. So, and I'm amazed of the depth of your experience and depth of your scientific thinking and depth of your involvement with GLOBE. So I have nothing but just the admiration and gratefulness for everything that you do, Elena. So, and I'm juggling to say Dr. Sparrow or Elena, so I don't know which way it would be a nice.
Either one works.
Either one, yes, absolutely. So yes,
Thank
and
you.
I added my acknowledgement, land acknowledgement, and I'm happy that it becomes a part of our tradition to acknowledge the land that we are very fortunate to live and to co-share on this planet. So it's a Nipmuc nation here in Massachusetts. So I'm part of the indigenous nation. I am representing Bashkir nation, but I came from Bashkortostan to US. So so it's really touching the depth of my feelings and the heart. It's just really, and I represent culture that is oriented and prioritize the elderly, the wisdom. I respect all other cultures, and many cultures really put emphasis on the youth, which is I'm very strongly supportive of.
Yes.
But at the same time, again, there are very rich, very representative, very inclusive cultures who really treasure the elderly wisdom. So,
Right.
and that's how I grew up. So, and that's how I learned from many other cultures as I go through my life. So Lena, I can talk for many hours. I know the time is limited, but I want to really say that bravo and hats off to what you do, Elena. Keep doing what you're doing, and I'm really admiring your example, how you lead the next generation to what needs to be done. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. So it is the intergenerational learning is very important because yeah, so much. I know, like when our own children, my children, you know, when they're very young, they say, you know everything, mom, you know, and then they come to an age where parents don't know anything, you know, when they're teenagers and they think, oh, you know, my parents don't know anything, and then they grow some more, and then they realize, oh, my parents do know something. And so we just need to, you know, cultivate and be patient, because that's part of the phases that they're growing through. they're part of the phenology as they grow and mature. But you know, I come from, like you, Larissa, I'm also from another place in another culture, which also encourages the intergenerational learning as well as intergenerational living in one place. So it's not unusual to have 3 generations in a household where, you know, the grandparents are there, and then the parents, and then the children. And so I think, you know, we are all, you know, we need to remember our connections and our roots, you know, so that we can take wings. So anyway, thank you all for, I appreciate it. So we have 3 minutes. Okay, thank you for attending this and the opportunity to be able to share what we're doing here. I have a wonderful team that who works with me, and they're very, very capable, and also cares as much as I do about relationships with each other and also with our environment. Yeah.
If you have a moment, it looks like Bara had raised a hand. I don't know if you have 1 minute left.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
I think we can give space to few last questions. So Bara, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Elena, for mentioning all those, you know, things, generations, roots, and all that. And my question was about the storytelling, because you mentioned that, right? That it's an essential part of how of the communication, of sharing. And my question would be, is that a storytelling like with using the words only, or are there words and perhaps dance, music, or is there any like visual arts?
Yes.
In that also, I'm just interested, like how we can perhaps, you know, learn from that and use it when learning and in GLOBE, and, you know, to express in some other ways than just, you know, data and graphs and words.
Exactly. So we have, you know, we have the another project, Winter Berry, and it's the phenology of berries. What happens to the berries when, you know, during the fall into the winter and spring, because then you know, how is it available for food for animals, but also so does it fall off and rot, or, you know, maintained under the snow? And so, you know, we have that Phenology of Berries project, and one of the things that we did is not only the science of, you know, observing those berries, and this project is you know, the PI, and I'm is Katie Spellman, and I'm a co-PI, is the effects of storytelling, you know, the treatments of in the learning. So we had one where it's just regular citizen science, you know, you train the students or community members, and then the other one is where you have you work with scientists directly face to face. And then the third one is you work with the scientists and storytelling, and scientist and educator and storytelling. And the storytelling had a significant effect on the learning of science by younger kids. Now with the older kids, it did seem like they thought it was science because it was storytelling, you know. But for the younger kids, it was significant in how they made sense of the science that they were doing. And so like you said, Bara, their art is very much a part of the learning. That's why they call the STEAM, you know, the not only STEM, but put the A for STEAM, for the art. And it could be storytelling, it could be illustrating, drawing. I'm a poor drawer, but anyway, or dance, like what the students did. They wrote their story in song and danced to it. And so that's very much a part. In that way too, if you think about it, we're trying to cultivate the whole person, not just the head, but the whole person. And so kinesthetics, you know, dance, you know, they're all part of us. And also our spirit, you know, we have to cultivate our emotions and our thinking, and so in our whole body. And so this is all part of learning and growing in our understanding of what's the world around us.
Thank you for this.
I think it is so important what you said just about emotions, that we also need to work with emotions. And yes. I also like so much the project about berries, the phenology of berries, of something that is so like everybody knows it. It's not some like distant science, but something that
right.
people can really relate to.
Yeah, everybody loves berries. Everybody loves to pick berries. And so they have their own stories. They have their own stories from their own families. We, you know, like some kids would say, yes, every, you know, certain part of the month in the fall, they would go out with their families and gather berries, and they have their own favorite spots that they won't share with other people. So that they could, they have their own hiding, you know, source of berries. You know, one other project we have is that is important to communities is the ice, the freezing and thaw of rivers and lakes. And so, especially here in Alaska, now it's happening. We're now spring and there's still frozen, you know, river. And so if the melting of the ice on the river is not is slow, if it's not slow and it's fast, then, you know, there is danger of flooding of villages. And so now they have observers, and they're using the GLOBE Observer app, the Land Cover Observer app, to take note of what's happening on the rivers. And this is then used by the National Weather Service to predict whether a village could be in danger of flooding. And so it's a very practical, you know, application of, it's not just, you know, oh, it's kind of nice, it's appreciation of the nature, but also important to how it could affect lives directly. So citizen science is really, you know, community science, you know, really important.
Yes, that's true. Well, I
think we're over.
Yeah, I have to say I have so many questions in my head. So, but the time is running fast, and we are a bit over. So, I think if I can see also Bara and Larissa that they would like to ask, and I hope that we can organize some further webinars together, perhaps next year, and we can continue talking about all these beautiful projects. So yeah, with that, I think we should end for today. And
Yes.
and I want to thank you from my whole heart for this beautiful hour and for sharing everything with us. And before we end, I have one invitation, and the invitation is for the last webinar of this spring Phenology campaign. The webinar will be held on June 1st in the afternoon. It will be at 3 p.m. Prague time or Central European time. And it will be a webinar focused on sharing. So we invite all of you from schools to join in, to send us your presentations and share what you did during the spring campaign. And to all of you who are not from schools, we invite you to come and hear the experience of students and teachers that work in the Phenology campaign. And of course, we will send you an invitation by an email. We will send you registration form. So this is just an invitation, and more information will follow. Also, the recording of today's webinar will be available on the GLOBE website, on the Phenology campaign website, so you can come back to it. So thanks a lot, and yeah, have a nice spring days. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you.